All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you. Thank you all for coming to our fifth public meeting of the city's Refinery Advisory Group. My name is Brian Abernathy. I'm the city's managing director, joined by Commissioner Teal, my co-chair of the committee, and I'll be introducing a couple of members of the Business Advisory Group shortly. The purpose of this meeting is to get feedback about the refinery and its future from the perspective of the business community. And I want to take a minute to thank the members of the Advisory Group's Business Committee: Ann Nevins, Matt Cabry, Ed Hazuri, Anna Shipp, Jerry Sweeney, Dennis O'Brien, Craig White, and Harold Epps, as well as Sylvie Gallier Howard and the team at the city's Commerce Department. For all of you, thank you for the work that you put into this. I also want to thank Prep's Charter School once again for graciously allowing us to use their school, and thank all of you for the time here this evening. If this is your first meeting, I want to give a brief reminder of why we're here. The purpose of this advisory group is to help the city convene a wide array of stakeholders who have different perspectives and expertise on the refinery. The advisory group will not make policy decisions or recommendations. Instead, the people who are on the advisory group have been tasked with convening stakeholders to present information to the city. We want to make sure our members can tap into their networks and bring a wide array of perspectives and opinions to the table. The goal of this process is to gather information and perspectives and to listen to them. We want people to be a part of this process by telling city officials what we need to know and what we need to think about. As we noted during the last 4 meetings, there are many things about the refinery site that are not in the city's control. After all, it is a privately owned site. But we want to make sure we are asking the right questions, thinking about the right things, and planning for a variety of scenarios as the future of the PES site becomes clearer. During the meetings we held last month, we received very helpful feedback from labor, community members, and academic and environmental experts about how they feel about the existing site and what ideas they have for how it should be used in the future, as well as some of the challenges around the site. Tonight's meeting will focus on gathering the perspective of the business community. We will have 3 presentations, and the materials will be made available online at phila.gov/refinery afterward. After the presentations, we'll provide an opportunity for those who have signed up to speak to do so. Tonight's meeting is not intended to focus on hearing pitches or making specific recommendations for the future businesses or industries at the site. Instead, we're here to learn more about the impact of the refinery closure on the overall economy, and learn more about what types of ideas we are likely to see emerge in the future from the private sector. As a reminder, the site is privately owned and in the middle of a bankruptcy proceeding, so it's not clear what the full range of future viable uses might be. This will be influenced in part by the private market as well as by the bankruptcy court. We are confident that many people will have good ideas for what could be possible on some or all of the site in the right market conditions. We're here tonight to try to get a better understanding of what that full range of possible viable ideas might be. Like in past meetings, once we get through the presentations and agenda, we will allow people to offer comments for 3 to 5 minutes. We have 18 people who have already signed up, which will likely take us to 7:30 when we do need to conclude this meeting. If you know, school's in session, and staff has been here for a long time. But we also encourage you to send us an email at refinery@phila.gov if you would prefer to share your comments in writing. Once again, I want to stress how important it is to be respectful to everyone. I know we have a lot of different points of view around this issue in the room. And while we've tried to organize meetings that would allow us to hear about this from different angles, we recognize that folks want to make sure that their opinions are heard. Everyone is entitled to a safe and respectful environment, and anyone who shouts anyone else down, interrupts speakers, or acts in a confrontational manner toward anyone else here will be asked to leave. As I mentioned during the last meeting, we'll be scheduling one more public session to hear community feedback. Right now, we're planning to have this session on Wednesday, September 25th, here at Prep Charter School. The details for that format are still being worked out, but we do envision this session to be structured more like an open house for the community rather than a formal meeting. City staff will present to the public a summary of the feedback we have heard from you so far through this process and ask people to add additional thoughts or otherwise make their voices heard. We will present this information on large signboards placed around the room and provide ways for people to add on to what's already been said or add things they feel are missing. We're not planning this event to have a formal agenda or organized presentations. and it will not provide time at the microphone for comment. Rather, it will be structured more informally, with small groups and facilitated conversations, and its purpose is to let people know what we've heard from you and provide another opportunity for you to weigh in. The open house will be scheduled from 5:30 to 7:30, and people are welcome to come and go as they please during that time. At the conclusion of this process, all of the feedback we have received will be put into a report and will be made publicly available. Please continue to check the advisory group's website for periodic updates at phila.gov/refinery. And now I'm going to ask members of the advisory group to make brief introductions and then turn it over to Sylvie Gallier-Howard. Maybe we start at the end.
Ali Afferman Stanger with the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development.
Ed Hazuri, been involved with that facility for almost 35 years.
Mark Hughes from the University of Pennsylvania.
Adam Teal, Fire Department and Office of Emergency Management.
I'll pass on.
Matt Cabry from Select Greater Philadelphia and our Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia.
Ann Bovaird-Nevins from PIDC.
Ryan O'Callahan, Steelworkers. Jim Snell, Business Manager, Steamfitters Local 420 with the Philadelphia Building Trades.
Jody Della Barbara from Girard Estate Area Residents, and I've been a member of the Refinery Community Advisory Panel for 23 years.
Sean Jelasinski with the Sports Complex Special Services District.
Christine Knapp from the City's Office of Sustainability.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Sylvie Gallier-Howard. I'm First Deputy for the City's Commerce Department. And just have some brief remarks. I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for coming out on a Monday night to discuss this important topic, and would like to thank all the members of the Business Committee, many of whom participated in subcommittee meetings and helped with research and ideas, as well as engaged in important discussions about the future of the PES site. The mission of the Business Committee was to prepare for and assemble a group of stakeholders to provide testimony and information about the significance of the PES refinery to the regional economy, economically viable uses for the site in the future, and advantages, risks, liabilities attributable to the site. And that's the meeting we're having tonight. To accomplish this mission, the Business Committee reached out to a wide array of stakeholders such as SBN, the Chamber of Commerce, the African American Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Asian American Chamber, Independence Business Alliance, PIDC, and many more to help contribute ideas and engage a diversity of businesses. The focus of tonight's meeting is on the economic impact of the PES refinery's closure and potential viable reuse options that can help reverse the devastating job and economic loss that resulted from the closure. The Business Committee focused on data points that were available to quantify the economic impact and studied comparative situations to determine the most likely reuse options. While the purview of tonight's committee is focused on economic analysis, I want to be clear that the city is equally focused on safety, health, and environmental impacts of the site. The Community, Environment, and Labor Committees are also looking at these topics closely. We also know that health and environmental factors do contribute to the economic impact this site has on our city and region, even if it may be hard to quantify. Tonight you will hear presentations summarizing the work that was commissioned, and you will have the opportunity to share your thoughts, reactions, and ideas. We're here to engage in dialogue and generate ideas that will lead to the best outcomes for all of those impacted by the closure, and we look forward to tonight's discussion. This isn't the end of the discussion, but rather one step of an ongoing process to engage the community, and Brian mentioned the email. Speaking for the Commerce Department, the city agency that represents the business community and strives to ensure inclusive neighborhood economic development, our doors are always open to hear ideas if you want to approach us about those. And now I'll hand it over to Ann and Matt, co-chairs for the advisory committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvie. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Cabry, and thanks to everybody for taking time out of their busy schedules to be part of this process. I just wanted to acknowledge a couple processes that we went through to get us here today. And I want to start with a big thank you to the Kenny administration and the thoughtful approach that under the leadership of Mayor Kenny with Brian Abernathy in the Managing Director's office and Commissioner Teal in bringing together a very thoughtful approach to thinking through what's possible. And our goal tonight, the fifth of 5 public meetings, is to share ideas, to share facts, to hear options, and to listen to your ideas and options as well. So we do have, as Brian mentioned, a very thoughtful approach to what we're going to be exploring tonight. And with that, Ann, my co-chair, is going to lead us through our first series of presentations and moderate our feedback from the public as well. So, Ann, off to you.
Thank you, Matt. By moderate, I also have the happy job of keeping time for everybody. So I've got my timer up here, and when we get to the public Q&A, public statements, I will be managing that part of the process. But first, I want to start by introducing our opening presentations, which we hope will provide some insights in terms of the 3 primary areas that the Business Committee has been asked to look at. And as Sylvie mentioned, those 3 are the significance of the refinery to the regional economy, economically viable uses for the site in the future, and advantages, risks, and liabilities attributable to the site. I want to reemphasize on what the previous speakers have mentioned about this being essentially the start of dialogue, and this being, setting the table for what I think will be a continued, very engaged process between lots of different stakeholders. So we've set up some presentations this evening that I hope will be informative to provide some insights and preliminary analysis along those topics, but please don't think of this as the be-all, end-all, or definitive information. This is really a starting point to have a dialogue continue about the future of the refinery. So with that, I'm going to introduce Gabrielle Connor from eConsult, who is going to talk about her preliminary analysis related to the economic impact of the refinery. Gabby. Hold on a second.
You're on now. Here we go.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah. My name is Gabby Connor. I work at eConsult Solutions. We're an economic consulting firm. We are right at 15th and Walnut. And we have worked with nonprofit organizations, also public and private institutions. We do a lot of things in Philadelphia, but also across the country. So we were simply tasked with calculating the economic impact of the PES refining complex. And I'll get right into it. We went into 3 different geographies: the city of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia MSA, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As I go through this, when we refer to PES, we are discussing this PES refining complex, the oldest, largest refinery on the East Coast. It's a 1,400-acre facility comprised of these 4 components. So the economic impacts following in this presentation are about the Girard Point Refinery, the Point Breeze Refinery, the Schuylkill River Tank Farm, and the North Yard Rail and Storage. All economic impacts are within the city of Philadelphia. So all the economic impacts are about a steady state operations of PES. So pre-fire, pre-bankruptcy, a full operating year of PES in Philadelphia. It's the estimated economic impact associated with this illustrative year of operations. Before I get into the economic impact results, I just want to back up for a second and describe what I mean by economic impact. This is defined as the direct plus indirect and induced impacts. That all combined creates the total economic impact. What I mean by total direct expenditures are all PES's operating budgets. They pay their employees employee compensation, and they also pay for all non-personnel expenditures. So these are the goods and services that PES procures locally to operate PES. Now, All of this is local. This does not include crude oil purchases from outside of the state or outside of Philadelphia, outside of the MSA. All of these are contained in Philadelphia at those four components that I discussed on the previous slide. So the employee compensation creates the induced effect. Induced effect is when the employees of PES went and spent their salaries at the grocery store. They paid rent. They spent money on transportation in Philadelphia. This creates an induced effect. So then the grocery store, Trader Joe's, has money they pay their employees. It creates additional effects. So that's what I mean by spillover effects into the economy. On the other side, we have the non-personnel expenditures, which create the indirect effect. So when PES purchased materials or they had to procure other firms for transportation or other engineering services, they work with other local businesses, and those businesses then pay their employees, which creates additional induced effects. So you have indirect effects, which can create more induced effects. That all combined is direct plus indirect plus induced, and then you have your total economic impact. So that's generally what the definition of economic impact is there. So all of the numbers that follow up here about Philadelphia, about the MSA, and about the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania will be describing that total economic impact. So this first slide is about the direct impacts. This is PES, and when they were fully operating, their total budget was this last line here, $1.1 billion they were spending in Philadelphia to operate the refining complex. They had 1,950 employees. This includes the union steelworkers. It also includes some contracted employees that worked on site, and it includes their part-time employees as well. They paid, of that 1.1 billion, they paid 237 million in their wages and salaries to those employees. And as discussed, those employee compensation, that 237 million creates the induced effect. And then the rest of their budget creates the indirect effect. So first we have the city of Philadelphia. The economic impact in the city of Philadelphia is, or was, 2.1 billion in this illustrative year of operations. It supported 6,300 jobs. So this includes the 1,950 employees working at PES, in addition to the indirect and induced jobs, and then that supports 600 million in total employee compensation. Also includes direct, indirect, and induced employee compensation there. We have a similar slide for the Philadelphia MSA. This is the 11-county Philadelphia MSA. So this includes counties in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, and Delaware. So the geography is slightly larger, and when the geography is slightly larger, the economic impact numbers will be slightly larger because more of the spillover is captured. Sometimes businesses work with other businesses outside of Philadelphia County, so a Bucks County firm might be included in that $2.3 billion in economic impact, and more jobs, therefore, will be supported as well. We also have economic impacts for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. $2.3 billion in economic impact in Pennsylvania, 7,650 jobs supported, and 640 million in employee compensation. You'll notice that the Philadelphia MSA numbers and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania numbers are similar, but those are two distinct geographies, both of which include the city of Philadelphia economic impact numbers, but have different spillover geographies. What's interesting about these jobs supported, so 7,650 jobs supported in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, these jobs are not just oil and gas production jobs. 25% of those jobs are the direct jobs at PES, but a lot of other jobs in industries outside of the oil and gas industry are supported. So the indirect and induced jobs are jobs like the jobs at the grocery store where the PES employees go to shop for their groceries. These are also real estate jobs. the PES employees are paying their rent or their mortgage. They're paying for transportation. This is supporting SEPTA bus drivers, things like that. So we have jobs, we have 14% of the indirect and induced jobs are in professional and scientific services, something like an engineering job. And then we have finance and insurance jobs supported as well. Healthcare, the PES employees go to the doctor or the dentist, so jobs are supported there as well. And then 10% of the indirect and induced jobs are in that administrative support services and 10% in hospitality services as well. Next, I'll move on to the tax impact. So in addition to economic impacts, when PES was operating in a full operating year, there was also tax impacts. These tax impacts, we created a custom tax model based on Philadelphia and Pennsylvania effective rates. This was a little tricky in that we do not have access to the direct taxes paid to the city and state governments. That's confidential information from PES. And so we created these custom tax models. We took into account the fact that PES was in a KOZ and they were exempt from a lot of property taxes. So the taxes we include here are business taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, and property taxes. In the city of Philadelphia, the total estimated tax impact each year was $33.2 million, and this is an annual number. So each year of this full operations at PES, they were generating $33.2 million in taxes. This includes direct taxes paid by PES, and also includes the tax revenue from the indirect and induced taxes of the goods and services procured by PES or the purchases of their employees. There's also taxes that were generated for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. $30 million in tax impact each year for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Also includes income, business, and sales taxes. Also takes into account that PES was in a KOZ. The city of Philadelphia and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania were two distinct entities, so these could be added together, whereas the economic impact numbers, the Pennsylvania numbers included the Philadelphia numbers. Here, the city of Philadelphia government was receiving $33.2 million in taxes, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was receiving $30 million in taxes each year. And that about wraps up my presentation. I'm going to turn it back over to Ann.
Great. Thank you so much, Gabby. And I'm going to call up Eliza while at the same time turning it over to Phil Hopkins from IHS for the next presentation.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Hopkins. I'm a senior economist for the firm IHS Markit. And we were asked to look at a series of uses that would attempt to take advantage of some of the assets of the site that I'll talk about. I want to emphasize that this is a market-based analysis, so the question that we're asking is, will the market, as we forecast it to be, support these activities going forward? A little bit about our firm. We are an international forecasting and information firm. The Philadelphia office that I'm part of has been in Center City for almost 40 years. Some of you may know the name Wharton Econometric Forecasting Associates. We are the largest economic forecasting organization in the world. However, we also have a lot of other components, and we're organized by major business unit. And there are three that really matter here where we have worldwide expertise. Energy, refining, and chemicals. And I'll be coming back to each of the three of those. And that's what we were asked to address, is the potential for those kinds of uses at the site based on the market. I would add that we've done two similar studies in the region recently, both at the Marcus Hook industrial complex, the former Sunoco refinery on the Delaware River, Those reports are publicly available, and as I'll note in my talk, there are a lot of similarities between Marcus Hook and this site, but also some crucial differences. So we're very familiar with the conditions up and down the river. So the first thing we did before beginning to identify feasible uses is to identify what we believe are the site assets, and then on the next slide, liabilities and uncertainties that will drive uses at the site. And you can see on the screen before you, but there clearly are some attributes that we think are very significant. It's a large site, one ownership, and obviously that has advantages and disadvantages, but that's a little unusual. We think there's some advantage potentially down the river because it's on both sides of the river. You might be able to do some different things. It clearly has petroleum processing equipment, storage facilities, and infrastructure that have been on site for a very long time. One of the issues we'll talk about is what kind of condition is that in. But the fact that it's there is a resource that can potentially be taken advantage of. It's got utility services, wastewater, the new rail unloading facility, depending on the use, could be an advantage. It has outstanding transportation access. It's hard to think of any place in the country where you have a 1,400-acre site that's near two interstates, near an international airport, has easy access to the port and rail access, and pipeline access. We have to refine some of that, but it's got great transportation access. It's close to University City and to Center City. Now that has certainly advantages and disadvantages, but having a site of this size close to the central district, business district, for example, if you're looking at biofuels, that proximity makes sense. It's appropriately zoned, and having spent a number of years with Select Greater Philadelphia, the one question people ask is, we certainly have a supply of skilled labor available for just about anybody that would want to use the site. Site uncertainties and liabilities, and we're early in our process, so as we go through, finish the marketing analysis, we'll refine some of these. But clearly, to our refining people who have done this analysis in Houston, one of the uncertainties is what's the condition of the equipment, what does it take to repair it, what can it be used for going forward. A specific issue is the potential to get natural gas liquids to the site via pipeline. If you're familiar with Marcus Hook, natural gas liquids are coming from western Pennsylvania to that site and being exported. Obviously, environmental conditions, that's an issue I know that's gotten a lot of discussion, not part of our purview, but we recognize that it can drive the site development. Urban location, close to residential communities, are certainly an issue for many people in this room. I did a quick calculation, and you can see the population numbers living within a certain distance of the site, and that's a reality. And an issue that will require more study, and I know the city is doing some work in this area, is how will climate change affect this facility going forward, particularly being located on the river. So once we had taken a look at the liabilities and the, let's get on to, there we are. I'm sorry, there, okay, now. So the next question then for people, for us to understand is prior to the fire and prior to the bankruptcy, what were the range of refined products that were being produced at that site? That's really our baseline, because in order to answer the question of could these uses be similar, be viable in the future, we had to understand what had been done there in the past. And as been noted, it's the largest refinery on the East Coast in terms of capacity. You can see the types of products that are produced there, but very significant production of gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, and then lower amounts of the others. One of our concerns here is that you had a very large segment of the productive refining capacity on the East Coast all of a sudden get turned off, and that has market implications that we'll be assessing going forward. So market conditions in the refining sector, and we really need to get a handle on these because this will really drive to what extent you can do refining and other energy-related activities at the site. Our forecasts tell us that demand for refined petroleum peaks in 2020 in the country, and you'll see that on a following graph, and then declines earlier on the East Coast. The causes driving that: increased fuel efficiency, higher mileage for cars, wider use of electric vehicles and such. The result of declining demand squeezes margins for refiners into cutting production. Our feeling prior to the fire was that we have 5 refineries in the East Coast, and probably one of those was going to have to close just because it would be hard to compete. East Coast is expected to see the steepest declines in demand, higher operating costs, and competition from alternative sources. There are refineries in the Midwest that can send material here. There's some being built in the Caribbean and Africa that can send gasoline here. And there's actually an interesting trend in the global tanker fleet. There's a requirement for higher quality bunker fuel, and that will change the kinds of operations of refiners who will benefit the most to those that have complex refineries and hydropacking capacities. So here's the graph, and this is total demand for refined product in the U.S. over time. And the large green group, the bar at the bottom, is gasoline. And so you can see by this chart that we foresee that in the U.S., the total demand for refined product will peak in 2020 and then begin a long, gradual decline thereafter. And that decline will be sharper along the East Coast. And that's the reality of the market situation that refineries are going to be operating in and need to be able to adapt to. So the list of industrial reuse options that we think are potentially viable at the site from a marketing perspective based on supply and demand conditions. And let me add that we regularly forecast supply and demand conditions, price of oil, price of fuel on a global basis. So this is an analysis that brings not only regional but global forecasting capability to it. Big question is the continued use of petroleum processing at the site. And could part or all of the site be maintained for this use, subject to market conditions? For example, what can you do at Point Breeze? What would it be suitable for producing? Alternative energy. We're actually very high on the use of this site for alternative energy, renewable fuels, because it takes advantage of a lot of the assets that are already there, the storage equipment, processing. We think it's very well suited for that. Natural gas liquids, they're being produced in the western part of the state in great abundance. They're currently flowing to Marcus Hook. We need to investigate the extent to which you can get them onto the site, but if you can, they're a very important basis for petrochemical manufacturing. Natural gas liquids, particularly ethane, can be converted to ethylene, converted to plastic resins, and those plastic resins go into just about every product that you can imagine. We did the analysis for the ethane cracker in Pittsburgh to determine how Pennsylvania can take advantage of that particular facility. So it could be located here. We need to refine the supply question. Petrochemicals, there are a variety of petrochemical uses that could take place here depending upon getting the inputs there. We certainly acknowledge that there are other non-chemical, non-energy manufacturing uses that can happen there. While they may not need all of the advantages of the site, it's certainly appropriate. One thing we will note is that it has advantages in site planning. Some of these facilities we're talking about are large. If you consider other kinds of manufacturing operations that are small, it allows you to use the site. For example, plastic manufacturing can be done in very small parcels, and it allows you to be very flexible. And for the transportation reasons that I noted, we certainly think there's a logistics, warehousing, and distribution potential at the site, given its locational attributes. You just look at the map, and it just jumps out at you. So we did a little literature search because we wanted to see what had been done at other industrial sites or refineries that had recently closed. And there are two very recent examples. One, as I noted, the work that we did at Marcus Hook. Those studies are publicly available. If you want copies, just let us know. But now, that site is about a third the size of this one, and it has some constraints, but it's a very similar kind of consideration. The Keystone Industrial Port Complex is up in the northeast, and it's the old U.S. Fairless plant. A very large site, but with slightly different attributes, but is slowly being redeveloped over time for a variety of manufacturing, heavy and light industrial uses. As I noted, we see a lot of opportunity for biofuels and renewable energy. And here just are two examples of refineries that recently closed, one in California and one in France. And they've been converted to producing, on a renewable basis, diesel and jet fuel. So that is being done. It'll depend on the market and the conditions. Probably the most common use initially for a closed refinery until the market shakes out is as a product storage terminal, as is happening at Marcus Hook. You've got the equipment, you usually have the location, you're often on the water, you have the pipelines. They can be very well suited in the short term for a product storage terminal. In the case of Marcus Hook, ethane is coming in, is being put on a ship and sent to Norway, and that's a very natural use. Clearly, logistics. As I noted, the locational attributes of the site make an awful lot of sense to us. So key factors in determining the viability of reuse options. Obviously, PES owns the site, so it's going to be ultimately very dependent upon what they see as viable reuse options. We've tried to replicate their thinking to the extent that we could. So that would be the market justification. You're going to need somebody who's willing to make the necessary investment to upgrade the equipment. Compatibility of the uses with environmental contamination. Are there areas on the site that are very contaminated and those that aren't? And that will drive site development. Costs and timing, obviously. Do you upgrade the facility? Do you let some equipment go? Changing the infrastructure to allow uses. One of the challenges at the Marcus Hook site is in order to create land for new development, you had to remove tanks and pipes, and that's a very costly and significant effort. But in a site like this, that's how you free up land that can be used for other purposes. And finally, I close with, as in any development project, location and market conditions, local or global, depending on the use, really matter. And finally, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. The market will drive it, so you need to think long-term in terms of the phasing of activities and where the market drives you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. And now I am pleased to introduce Eliza Albert from the Sustainable Business Network to talk about potentially economically viable uses for the refinery site.
Thanks, Ann. As Ann said, I'm Eliza Alford from the Sustainable Business Network. As our executive director, is a member of the Refinery Advisory Group Business Committee. We helped with the stakeholder engagement process, along with a number of other business organizations in the region, to work on answering this question: what are some potential economically viable uses for the refinery site? As Ann mentioned earlier, this is a preliminary conversation. I think it's important to note that this really was an exercise in idea generation. It reflects the knowledge of the stakeholders and the groups who are a part of this process, and is not in any way a comprehensive list of potential uses, just what we came up with today. So we engaged 23 stakeholders as a member of this subcommittee. And they represented a wide range of industries, business sizes, and areas of expertise, ranging from local independent businesses to large corporations with a Philly presence, and represented industries ranging from traditional energy to alternative energy, engineering firms, resource recovery, manufacturing, logistics, real estate, a really wide range of businesses in the region. Similar to the end of Phil's presentation, we were not able to get in the heads of the people who will ultimately have the opportunity to really make this decision. So we felt we needed to determine some criteria for potential uses, and this focused on what was publicly available to us and the expertise available in our stakeholder group. So that led us to come up with this list of criteria for potential uses, including zoning, environmental remediation needs, the local industry and market viability, the public health and safety and environmental concerns, as well as land use, existing infrastructure, and the types and number of jobs that could be created on the site. We landed with kind of three potential use categories. This was after an initial process of idea generation. These three categories came out as the most viable options, and then we divided the list and the stakeholders with the most expertise in these areas into groups to determine what ideas are potentially viable and fit those in with the criteria. We have a pretty long list here for alternative energy and resource recovery. A lot of these ideas came from the stakeholders who are in the room, as well as other ideas and research that have been generated through other committee meetings that have happened in this room, and take into consideration local and regional energy needs, job opportunities, waste, as well as local economic needs more broadly. Under the port and logistics category, this is where the logistics and manufacturing kind of fall. The reason this kind of rose to the top was, as Phil mentioned, the transit nearby, the site infrastructure, as well as current and potential needs of businesses in the region now, as well as in the future, and kind of the nature of our modern economy with a lot of needs for manufacturing, data, and logistics. And finally, traditional energy. These were also generated by the stakeholders in the room, as well as some ideas that were listed on other research when refineries in other areas have closed. And finally, the needs of the market and the industry as well. Again, as a reminder, this was an idea generation process and is not meant to be an active pitch of what should be on the site, but instead a thought process or a thought exercise in imagining what could be based on the needs of our local economy and the knowledge and expertise of the stakeholders who were engaged by this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza. Thank you very much to our presenters. And now we will begin with the registered speakers who had signed up in advance to speak at this session. Like in the previous sessions, for those who have attended, we are going to have time limits. We're going to ask folks to keep their remarks to no longer than 5 minutes. I'm going to give a 3-minute timer so that you know when you're getting near to the end of your speaking time, and we'll ask everyone to respect all of the speakers that have signed up. We do have quite a number, and ensure that you end at your allotted time so that we can make sure we do have time to hear from everyone who has signed up to speak. The first speaker that I am going to call up is Representative Chris Rabb from the PA House of Representatives. Yes, and sorry, Matt just reminded me, we are planning to bring up 2 speakers at the same time to help keep things moving more quickly. So Lori Mazer is the second speaker in the group if you want to join Representative Rabb at the table.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is State Representative Chris Rabb. I represent the 200th Legislative District of Pennsylvania, which covers 2.5 neighborhoods in Northwest Philly. So I'm far outside of my legislative district, so you may ask why I'm here. Because I'm a state lawmaker, and this is important to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm a pro-worker, pro-environment lawmaker. I taught for 4 years at Temple University teaching social entrepreneurship and innovation, a lot of the stuff that's being discussed here. I was unceremoniously relieved of duty as a professor when I helped organize 1,500 adjunct professors to expand that union. So I'm walking the talk. I'm on the Energy Supply Task Force with the National Conference of State Legislators. I just joined the National Board of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. So in some ways, you could see me as a tree hugger. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But I'm here because I believe in community wealth. I wouldn't be in office today if it wasn't for 51 years ago when the city of Baltimore tried to put an incinerator in a poor black community where my mother was raised. They put a pool in the white community, and they put all the shit in the black community. That's one of the reasons I'm here, because that was environmental racism before the term was coined. And my grandmother was a badass. She fought for the people who she lived with. She cared about everyone and spoke up when no one thought they had the political will or political power to do anything. And they were successful. And she was not an environmentalist. She was not a feminist. She was not a progressive. None of those terms were bandied around back then. She just cared about her community like everyone in this room. Like everyone in this room. And I'm not going to let people frame this as environment versus labor. That's bullshit. I'm sorry, son, for cursing in public. I know you don't like that, but I come from a colorful family. This is not about labor against environment. This is Philly. I mean, we're creative. Are you telling me we don't have the collective will and vision to imagine something amazing? Amazing, not just like something that will sustain things, but next level stuff that honors the workers who saved hundreds of thousands of lives recently. So much respect to the workers who are on site who saved Philadelphia. First and foremost. All right, let me wrap this up. I'm getting all excited. We have the capacity. We've already seen some hints of fabulosity, things that we could do, but we need the political will. We need the mayor to step up. We need the city council to step up, but you also need people like me, most of the folks who are invisible. A lot of folks don't know about us on the state level. There's $455 million in tax credits from the state in 1 year, going to all sorts of places. Do we deserve that in Philly? To help displaced workers? To help long-standing community members? To help the economy? To help the environment? Yes, we can do this. We can do this, but we have to do it together. I'm not an optimist by nature. I'm actually mildly allergic to optimism. But I do believe in stats and figures that are brought in good faith. I do believe in the power of organized labor. I do believe in community wealth building. And I believe that all of us at the table can figure this out. But let's not be safe here. Let's be bold, because we're Philly. Thank you.
Thank you. Since Lori Mazer, it doesn't appear, is here, I'm going to call up Shayna Marsden and Sean Tolomeo.
Hi, I'm Sean Tolomeo. I was born and raised in Grace Ferry, lived in South Philadelphia for the last 36 years. I've been employed at the refinery for the last 12 years. And my one hope is that this committee makes their recommendations based on fact and not feelings. It's sad when a politician gets up here and pushes an agenda of this being a black or white thing. This refinery wasn't put there yesterday. We're not asking for this refinery to be put there today. This refinery is there. This refinery has been there. This refinery has been there through multiple races of those communities. Okay? Like I said, I was born in Grace Ferry. I grew up there. I just recently moved out of Grace Ferry to another location in South Philly. My girlfriend, my fiance, lives in Grace Ferry. My family, my friends live in Grace Ferry. My church is in Grace Ferry. So don't act like this we're trying to, environmental racism. Because that is as our politicians so politely put it, bullshit, okay? Because what we need to look at is the facts, and the fact is that the best option for this site is a refinery. You can put up there and say that oh, we can make it a parking lot, or let's dream, let's imagine. You know what that is? That's dreams and imagination, and it's not going to get you anywhere. $63 million in taxes will be lost, we heard tonight. Almost 8,000 jobs will be lost, what we heard tonight. That doesn't count the $9 million in city wage tax that those employees that work at that refinery pay every year. What about the property taxes when they start to move away? What about the school taxes? We can get up here and say that we're going to dream and we're going to imagine, but where are we going to dream and imagine those tax dollars? When's the community meeting going to start when we start deciding what programs are going to be cut? What taxes are going to increase? Because you know who's affected when programs are cut, when taxes increase? The lowest majority people, the lowest income people are the ones that are negatively affected by tax increases. The lowest income people are the ones that are negatively affected by programs being cut. Because I can guarantee you that whatever white community our politicians want to talk about, that community is still going to have its pool. That community is still going to have its programs. What's going to happen to the after-school communities? What's going to happen to the public schools, the programs? What's going to happen to those when that $63+ million in taxes is gone? Whoa, are we not allowed to talk? I thought anyone that affects something is going to be asked to leave.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay? What's going to happen then? That's what we need to realize here, and that's the fact of the matter, is that best option is to have those 8,000 employees employed, paying taxes, being contributing members to the community. The politicians don't want to get up here and talk about all the money that we've raised for cancer research or for other programs. How about the clothing drives we do, the Adopt a Child program we do, the bike-a-thons, all of that. And that's from the members of USW. If you want to talk about the environment and you want to talk about safety, guess what? The men and women of USW have stood beside the community for the environment and safety every step of the way. And we will continue to stand by the community because we live in the community. And our families are from the community. So let's make our decisions and make our recommendations on fact. And let's stop dreaming and let's get down to business and do the right thing here and keep those men and women employed.
The next speakers are Peter Winslow and Jamila Medley, if you would both come to the table. And I'll just remind everybody, as Brian said in the beginning, we definitely want to make sure that we have everyone's voices heard. We want to make sure that we are creating a respectful environment, so we would ask that everybody in the audience and all of the speakers keep to that tone. All right. Mr. Winslow.
Thank you. My name is Peter Winslow. I'm the president of ASK, Smart Collaboration, seeking to have open conversations between all participants in this discussion. And I thank you, as always, Mr. Abernathy and Ms. Nevins for presenting this, and also for all the members of the Refinery Advisory Group. I'd like to especially thank Mark Allen Hughes for the article that was published in the Philadelphia Inquirer today, which was a feedback that was given from the Environmental Committee to the work that they have been doing, and then before and since the meeting that was held, the public meeting that was held right here on August 27th. Thank you, Mark. And that dialogue, that two-way conversation, I'm very pleased that that is going to be presented and continued by the rest of the folks on the advisory group. And I hope that will be a robust conversation and will remain two ways. The innovation that was presented by the Environmental Committee of having presentations to begin the discussion was very, very helpful. And the presentations that we had just now were also very helpful. But not to exactly take issue, but to frame in a slightly different way some of what we heard in those presentations. The central issue basically was not addressed. It was, from a common sense, man in the street perspective, the real question, the bottom line question is, does Philadelphia need a refinery? And the answer to that question is no, we don't. Do the workers need jobs? Absolutely. Do the workers need to be treated fairly, which they have not been? Absolutely. Do the people in South Philadelphia and in Southwest Philadelphia have the right to breathe clean air? Absolutely. But the question of whether the refinery is necessary, whether Philadelphia needs the refinery, really has not been addressed, so I'm going to address it. The answer is no. And there are many ways of establishing why that is so, but the simplest way to understand it is to just recognize that when the refinery closed down, people thought, boy, price of gas is going to go up. Oh my goodness, we're probably facing shortages. That didn't happen. Yes, the Philadelphia refinery is the largest refinery on the East Coast and responsible for somewhere in the vicinity of 29-30% of the total production in Pad 1. Absolutely. But the production from the Philadelphia refinery is not necessary to supply the distribution channel that feeds consumers who are driving their cars, industry, driving trucks and industrial processes, for all the other needs of the society that we have. It's not necessary, and that is because there is excess capacity in the entire system. That excess capacity is over 1.5 million barrels per day. So when the Philadelphia production went offline, the rest of the system adjusted. Okay. So that analysis, other analysis will show that it is not necessary that this refinery be there. The rest of the analysis that was presented, I think, was excellent, and I don't think it goes far enough, because we are really talking not only among ourselves, but we are talking to Kevin Gross, the bankruptcy judge in the Delaware Bankruptcy Court, and most of the decisions about what happens to this refinery is going to be decided there, in that courtroom, and by the lawyers who are putting together the restructuring of this facility. The first slide that was up there that nobody spoke about was labeled Preliminary Analysis of the Economic Impacts of the PES Refinery Complex. The refinery complex is not only the property that is owned by PES. The refinery complex is a wider part of the total logistical infrastructure, and that's what we really should be focusing on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also going to call up Cheryl Perch.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jamila Medley. I'm Executive Director of the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance, otherwise known as PACA. And we envision a vibrant, growing network of cooperative enterprises that operate in all sectors of the economy to build a better world, providing essential services, strengthening democratic organizations, creating quality jobs, building community wealth, reducing poverty, strengthening our local economy, protecting the environment, and increasing community engagement. PACA's values align with solidarity and care, particularly with and for communities that have historically been left out of and or exploited by the mainstream economy. As such, we strive to be allies with the people of communities most impacted by issues of injustice. In the case of the PES refinery, we aim to listen to and learn from the community who has been living with many of the negative impacts of the refinery, including toxic air pollution and the legacy of polluted soil and groundwater that is being left behind. We support and stand with you. Simultaneously, we can hold that workers and the outcomes for them are also very important and deserve immediate interventions, including emergency transition aid paid for with public and corporate dollars for those workers who have and are losing jobs. I want to lift up, in fact, the historic collaboration between unions and co-ops that were forged during the labor movement of more than a century past. That collaboration has a modern resurgence, particularly regarding efforts between the International Steelworkers Union and Madrigon as expressed through the union co-op model. For the union workers harmfully impacted by the PES refinery, your friends in the cooperative movement stand with you to hold the refinery's past and present owners accountable. Yet the biggest picture we must take in is really about the intersections of our economy, our environment, and the people of communities. These conversations about the post-refinery use of this land are essential to envisioning new uses that do not reimagine the harms of the past, but rather envision a just transition, regeneration of resources, cooperation in labor, ecological and social well-being, equity, and deep democracy. PACA supports the growth of and investment in entrepreneurship and business creation that prioritizes people and planet over profits. Industries that can sustain a livable climate are strengthening. We support a vision of future use of the PES refinery that includes community-owned assets and worker-owned enterprises that can offer residents and workers equitable and democratic ownership and participation in the places of most importance to any of us, where we work and where we live. There are hundreds of cooperatively owned enterprises in Philadelphia operating based on the values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. The tens of thousands of co-op member owners throughout the city of Philadelphia care about this moment for our collective future, and especially because we have a deep concern for our community. As PACA member co-op, the Energy Co-op, which was founded in 1979 by members of the Weaver's Way Co-op in Philadelphia, has stated, our society is undergoing an historic transformation. The resources that powered the 20th century are limited and finite. Their supply is unsustainable in the long term, and their use results in undesirable environmental impacts. PACA's vision for a future green energy economy includes the growth of a locally owned solar and wind energy co-op sector that is owned by communities as well as workers, not behemoth corporations willing to risk our health and the planet for profit. The elements of this vision already exist. To the City of Philadelphia's government, please use your authority and power to grow opportunities for deeper civic and public engagement around issues regarding our economy and environment that trust the lived experiences of its most vulnerable residents. Please put people first and cooperate.
I'm now going to also call up Lisa Hastings. Ms. Perch, go ahead.
My name is Cheryl Perch. I'm the pastor at Summit Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia and the chair of the Philadelphia chapter of Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light, People of Faith Responding to Climate Change as a Moral Issue. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'd like to start by acknowledging what I think is obvious but often overlooked, and that is that fossil fuels have been a blessing. They've given us a level of prosperity and longevity and achievement that past generations could not even imagine. Working in the industry has been honorable and is honorable work, and where there are unions, it's relatively safe and well paid. Granted, too often fossil fuels have been extracted and burned and refined with a reckless disregard for the workers, for communities near fossil fuel operations, for the natural world on which we depend, and for future generations. But overall, fossil fuels have been a good thing. But we all know that too much of a good thing can be lethal. And fossil fuels are now lethal. Scientists are in agreement about the facts. If we don't get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions in the next 30 years, which is a blink of an eye, we'll be facing ecological collapse and a level of economic chaos that we cannot imagine. The lives and the well-being of billions of people, it sounds grandiose, but it's not. The lives and the well-being of billions of people are based on decisions that we make today. No one wants to hear that news because we know a transition will be hard. Even the most just transition will come with a cost. But we need to face that reality. Climate change needs to be the key factor in determining the viability of reuse options. For that reason, Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light opposes all new fossil fuel infrastructure, and a reopened refinery falls into that category. No one is asking to close down all fossil fuel operations tomorrow, but there's no room for investment in a replacement plant that will accelerate climate change. Whatever other criteria we may have for making business decisions, doing what is right has to be front and center and woven throughout. And the right thing is clear: to keep the refinery shut down, to remediate the site so it can be used for other things, build something that will be a blessing for future generations as well as our own. As people of faith, we also have hope. And we're confident that we can move together into a clean energy future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to call up Kenneth Land. Ms. Hastings, go ahead.
Hi. Is this on? Yeah. Hi. I'm here tonight as an active investor in business and in Philadelphia. First, I agree. We need to reject the idea that the city can't survive without the refinery. We do need jobs. We need revenue. We don't need the refinery. The refinery site is not the only place in Philadelphia where business and jobs can be created. And dirty energy production is the lowest use, not the only or the best use for that site. By broadening our view of where we're going to look for jobs and business, I think that it gives us the ability to nurture small growth businesses, have more diverse workforces and workplaces, and not find ourselves in a position when one company's potential closure creates a major economic or job crisis. We don't need to go through this again. I don't think we should invest more money or lives in the refinery as an oil refinery or other dirty energy industry, including producing the potent greenhouse gas methane from plants. Philadelphia will be a much more appealing place for potential investors in all businesses if we can say that we're reducing our contribution to climate change, not increasing it. That has a lot of economic value in today's world. So what business can we look for? One is Philadelphia could work to become the hydrogen fuel hub for the East Coast, if it takes action before New Jersey, Maryland, or Georgia does. Hydrogen fuel cells and synthetic hydrogen gas are growth industries now, and we should take the opportunity to do it. Electric vehicles will be complementing regular vehicles and hydrogen vehicles for years. Why not recruit or even start a company that manufactures EV car charging stations in and for Philadelphia? Why not manufacture solar panels or other small-scale solar equipment? There's a startup in the EU that holds patents on attractive small wind turbines, scale for individual houses. They're raising money in the US, and I suspect they could be enticed to build a plant in Philadelphia to reach the US and Canada. Again, this is a startup, but I think we need to look for new things. And perhaps labor could provide skills to build larger wind turbines and their components. I mean, if we can build ships, we can build wind turbines. Even if we develop, and I think we can develop businesses for the to replace the revenue and the jobs, people say we still have to do something with the site. I think that we should do something big. If the city condemned the refinery site, this potentially lethal site with a rickety refinery, and took it over for public purposes, we could put in a remediating solar farm where we would have basically raised solar panels that move with the tilt of the earth, and underneath it we could have remediation plants and microbes remediating the place while we're still generating electricity and money. I think that would really work pretty well. And it's also consistent with the industrial planning for this area for being energy production. And nobody says it has to be fossil fuel production. We could, if we put in, if we put in it could be a combination of wind turbines and solar, depending upon how that's working. Nothing has to be one thing. We could either sell the energy for a profit and use that for reinvestment in the neighborhood, possibly to help many of the people that need to transition from gas-burning heat to high-efficiency electric energy things. We could essentially help fund the transition from oil heat in Philadelphia to electric heat. And basically, if we did something like this and it's successful, we could try other small-scale wind and solar farms in other empty areas around the city. And everything doesn't have to be huge.
That's
Thank you.
fine. Thank you. I just want to make sure that if Mr. Land is here. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. And I would like to call up Patricia Libby.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Landy. I'm a professor of physics at the University of Pennsylvania, or at least I was until I retired last year. I spent the past 30 years studying energy generation in the sun, and about 15 years ago, I initiated a course on physics of renewable energy. And so what we're proposing, and Dr. Saberi actually talked about this at your last meeting, was to use the PES site as a construction maintenance facility for offshore wind turbines. The Department of Energy actually in 2015 did a detailed economic analysis of the Mid-Atlantic region, which is 1/8 the population of the country, and looked at the jobs that would be created and the volume of business that would be created by such a facility. And the answer was about 26,000 jobs directly and about 8,000 extra jobs. Now, the question is whether it's done in one site or in 2 or 3 sites. If it's in 3 sites, we will have 8,000 to 10,000 jobs. If it's in 2 sites, we'll have 15,000. And if we're the only site, it'll be 20,000. And so, in addition to that, obviously, there will be a lot of secondary supply businesses that will supply things to this facility. Now, what does it do for Philadelphia? Well, it will make this region appear as a progressive, forward-looking region, attract other companies and industries who want to be in a place that is environmentally sensitive and that has a long-term energy supply. It will also eliminate the dangerous source of pollution that threatens the health and welfare of our citizens. By the way, I have a PowerPoint presentation, And we will post that on the website of the group at the end of the week. I thought I could project it today. I didn't realize I couldn't. So why offshore wind turbines? Well, it turns out that we have superb winds off the coast, off the East Coast. It's the best source of winds in the United States. And so this region of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, District of Columbia, and Virginia really have access to an enormous natural potential. The present wind turbines are now 10 million watts. A 10 million watt turbine is enormous. It can't be moved over land. It has to be built at the edge of the water and then transported to the ocean point by barge or ship. So there's no other choice of doing it. The price of energy generated by wind turbines has dropped drastically, and now it looks like it's going to be the lowest cost of electricity in the coming decade. So this is really economically attractive, as well as producing a lot of jobs in the area. There's a map here, which I will put on the web, which shows you the wind conditions here. So just to give you an idea of what a 10 megawatt turbine looks like, and by the way, there is an example, because General Electric has now built a 12 million watt turbine. It's called Halide X, and it's being assembled right now in Rotterdam to be tested and will be marketed in 2021. I'm not advocating General Electric, but there are other companies doing the same thing. So just to give you an idea, a 10 megawatt turbine has a blade that's 360 feet long and a tower that's 500 feet long. You can't transport that over land. What we've been seeing is that the power of these large mega turbines has doubled every 10 years. And so the present projection is that in 2030, we'll be looking at 20 million watt turbines. Now, I should point out 20 of those turbines is equal to one coal power plant. So this is really an enormous energy source. And of course, by that time, the blades will be 500 feet long, and the towers will be 700 feet long. So it'll be the largest structure around. I have available examples of a picture of such a facility in the Netherlands. I have many of these. I also have an example of, this is a plan that Norfolk has generated because they are obviously competing. Is there competition? Yes. So what's going on? Well, Baltimore has already started building wind turbines for a site off Ocean City. And they're using a defunct steel plant, which is about 3,000 acres, I think. Norfolk and Newport News have made extensive plans to do the same thing. I showed you that picture just now. New Jersey has several potential sites. Wilmington, North Carolina is busy preparing a construction site. And we know about the ones, the 5, 6 megawatt turbines that are now operating off Block Island that were built in Rhode Island. So there is competition. If we move now, we have a chance of getting there. If we delay, if we procrastinate, then we will watch the world go by.
That's time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. A last call for Ms. Libby, and I'm also going to call up Mark Clincy. Okay. As well as Jeanette Miller. Eliza. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, it's for you.
Hello, my name is Mark Clincy. I am a resident of South Philadelphia and a member of Philly's Rhine. Before I continue, I want to say as a member of Philly's Rhine that we support the workers that work at the refinery. We don't want any of them to lose their jobs. Far from that. And we want the refinery to be held accountable, to see to it that they are compensated, or if the refinery does decide to turn green, that they teach the workers how to use this equipment so that they can train others. This is important. I am here today to talk to you about renewable energy sources and why we must get away from fossil fuels. Cancer diagnosis and asthma attacks have made it clear for generations in our neighborhood that fossil fuels must go. Now, the PES refinery, which is the largest refinery on the East Coast, has been the single largest source of local air pollution in the city, accounting for more than 50% of individual toxic chemicals that harm human health. Now, this is also fact. There have been over 70,000 scientific studies that show how air pollution likely impacts every single organ in the human body. The World Health Organization has described air pollution as a public health emergency. Renewable energy jobs, outnumbering fossil fuel jobs per capita, have made it clear that times are changing. For example, there is a company in Fort Madison, Iowa area called Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy Jobs. And they have taken over land in that area, and using solar power, they have turned that area green. And they have hired 665 people and gave them jobs. Now that's pretty good. And I know we can do it here in Philadelphia. Many residents have expressed interest in a community-owned renewable energy source being built on the refinery site. If the site were used to produce electricity using solar panels, it would generate enough power for 45,000 homes in the South Philly area. Finally, City Council must pass a moratorium on fossil fuels to protect residents, as well as our workers, from worsening health and an unlivable planet. Our lives are at stake. Thank you.
Thank you. The next two speakers are Jeanette Miller and Pamela Grant.
Jeanette Miller doesn't feel well, and I asked the board, can I take her, please?
Go ahead, sir.
All right.
Pamela Grant can also please come up.
Good evening. I want to start off by saying, I remember that board up there promised us that we would have somebody look like us on that board that live in our community. I've been here 5 times and it's changed. I don't see none of us, but that's all right too. But anyway, my name is Charles Reeves, and I lived in the community of Grace Ferry for 60 years. My father, who I consider a great man, right, was fighting this fight in the 70s against Sunoco, right? They lied to us and they gave us false information. But we're here now, right? So we're not going to continue that. I say to y'all, to all the union members, right, we, Philly Thrive, we don't want y'all to lose your jobs. We don't want to fight against y'all, but we don't want to die neither. Y'all know, right? The fact's been here. Let me finish. Can I finish? It's been professors, it's been scientists, everybody. I've been here 5 times. Everybody was saying the same thing. The refinery has been killing us, is killing us, and it's going to kill us. And if you are real in your heart, you know that we're dying, right? So what do? Do we keep on fighting each other? Or do we allow y'all to keep on killing us? Why are we here? Like everybody knows the facts. Now, I'm trying to figure out why are we here? Can we trust the city of Philadelphia to help us? Right? This is not about a war. I don't know how it turned into a war. but it is. But I don't waste my time with that. I just want y'all to understand one thing, right? As a person who lived across the street from the expressway all my life, right, where I buried numbers of people, prostate cancer I got, they took my prostate out, right? So we, again, know. The question is, how do we help y'all, and how do we help ourselves, right? And I mean, I got too many other fights. My young men are dying in the streets, right? They killing each other, and I'm in here fighting over air that I can't breathe. Come on, like, come on. This is like a waste. Like, it's funny. I don't even know. I look around and I say, what is here? That board, I hate to say it to y'all, right? Y'all don't represent us. Y'all don't. So what is this about? Like, is it show? If it's show, tell us. I got more fights to fight. I'm on the ground every day fighting to save lives. So if this is going to be a waste of our time, tell me. I'm telling us to block the expressway. Do we have to block the expressway for y'all to hear us? Right? Is this what it's going to take? Right? I don't understand this. Right? I'm going to close with this. Right? I want everybody to know, as a Christian, right? I pray for y'all. I want y'all to know I don't want y'all to suffer. Right? But I want y'all to also understand our fight. Right? Now, I'm going to leave, and I ask y'all, as the board, when you go back, let us be part of the decision. Let us sit, or at least know what y'all want to do. We're not going to be able to make decisions, but let us know so we can tell our kids. So we can tell our kids to move, right, you know what I mean, because y'all not going to change. But let us, somebody, sit at that table. All right? Thank you. Have a good time.
Thank you. Ms. Grant, and then I'm also calling up Jordan Quinn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pamela Grant. I'm a citizen of Philadelphia, 28 years. I've come up and I've spoken a few times, and I'm going to just go off of what's been said. Like we all say, nobody wants anyone to lose jobs. We just want to transition. We just want to transition safely and effective for our community, for our people. I'm sick of the manipulation and the lies and the schemes, and we just want to be real with our kids. Like, are we going to change or not? But with that being said, I just want to bring up a few facts. You know, the fact is we don't need the refinery. We can transition. Philadelphia has the opportunity to be a green, clean city, opportunity to really showcase other communities and cities that may have refineries or SEPTA, we have bus pollution, so on and so forth. But this refinery is dangerous. It's bad business. It's bad business. It's not creating any jobs for our residents here in the city. We want to work too. We want to bring hope and bring money back into the people here in the city so they can wake up and feel good about themselves. But what is the good that anybody's going to feel if when you wake up and you look on your phone or you look on your TV and it looks like a 9/11 a scene, crime scene? I want to bring up that PSC. Excuse me, I have so many notes. Like I said, PS is not bringing any jobs back into our communities. Back in 2012, a grant was given from Keystone Opportunity to help fund this refinery. Bankruptcy in 2018, like what is it really bringing to the people? Like seriously, it's pulling money, if anything. I understand bankruptcy was created so that they can get the money back, but what's the point? The money can come back here to the people. The money can be spent to retrain or give the union workers that are already employed, or maybe if they're laid off, they can get back into working. I just feel like the PES refinery isn't taking accountability for anything that it has done. It is not saying, okay, we're causing this pollution. It's just everything just being swept under the rug. And I'm just sick of it. It's a serial lawbreaker. Since April 2012, the Environmental Protection Agency has found PSE to be a high priority violator and a significant non-compliance of the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act. We know what happens to residents when they break the laws, but it seems like the refinery is just continuously allowed to be able to break the laws. But if I do it, I'm going to go to jail 30 plus on top of other charges. It's just ridiculous. I don't understand it. And with us having the opportunity to transition, whether it's solar, wind, air, we should be able to have the support, like everyone is being said, to give to each other, find the money, find those workers who want to continue to be employed and keep them employed. That's what it's about. We're here for each other. So, that's what I want to say. It's just bad business. There's other places the money can go, into schools, into parks. I know the workers get money taken out, but it's not going back into anything that the Philadelphians are here doing. I can't even ask my baby want to go to the park. It's no swings. You know what I mean? So it's just little things like that. Like, are we going to keep being lied to? Then just tell us that. Don't sit up here and hold these meetings like it's going to be something. And I understand that you all can't do it because it's private, but that's what you all do. You all make laws and make them happen. So let's not sit up here and say this is a dream, this is a fantasy. A dream and a fantasy and a blueprint made that place, and it can make another place.
Thank you. Mr. Quinn? And then I'm also calling up Martin Willis. Mr. Quinn, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, I'm a member of Socialist Alternative, and first thing first, I want to address the first comment in this meeting about Kenny's thoughtful approach. This is not a thoughtful approach. A thoughtful approach is not a handful of meetings that end with a glorified book report that will be shredded in a closed meeting where the actual power brokers are at. So let's be real here. How did we get here? Big business and the political establishment have failed all of us. Workers were robbed of their hard-earned pensions and the hard-earned victories they fought with the bosses, and community members had to breathe dirty air for years. Instead of the city going after PES, which is also a shell company for Sonoco, so let's be real here, with their neglect and outright crimes, they're being coddled in a closed-door meeting that none of us know any details about. Not only that, the city has intentionally fostered divisions between the community and workers. We need to make the fossil fuel companies pay massive amounts of cash for endangering union jobs and all of our collective lives. We need to take the refinery from these incompetent fossil fuel executive and business fools and place it under public ownership. Here's a basic economic analysis of the refinery at this point. Workers and the poor lose, the rich win. It's that simple. Let's talk about what is actually needed. A city public takeover of the refinery under the direct oversight of workers and community. Instead of us just fighting each other and interrupting each other in front of a panel whose decision is they're not affected by the decision either way, we are. Let's have this debate, because there are disagreements, in a meeting, in a worker community oversight meeting, where these debates can come together with a plan and we can actually do what needs to be done about the business and city bureaucrats saying we need to be realistic. We are dealing with a crisis. That means we must take unprecedented action. It is that simple. The first speaker was somewhat right. Taxes need to be raised, but us workers and the poor, we're not going to pay for shit. We need to tax Comcast, Verizon, and the filthy rich who live on our misery and divide us. Now let me ask a question. Why are we trusting another private company? It's because of their continuous failure that we're here in the first place. Let's be real. There's no guarantee that the union workers that lost their job are going to get their jobs back. Every time a refinery explodes, it opens up with fewer workers and fewer workers and fewer workers. The only guarantee, there's no guarantee of the community being hurt either. The only guarantee, if the risk is what they want, is that the fossil fuel executives will mess up, they'll go bankrupt again, create another crisis again, and I guarantee you will be in this exact same meeting. Do not say it is not possible. That is private property. The city takes over land all the time. If we can take over a poor worker's home for not paying taxes while they make $725, and put it in a sheriff's cell, why can't we take a refinery from private hands that has endangered union jobs and everyone's lives in Philadelphia? The union cannot win without the community, and the community cannot win without the union. If united, we can actually do the things that I am laying out. Because we all know that the city will not do good things from their heart. Philly is a union town, and we should remember that. Douglass, who fought against slavery, Frederick Douglass fought against slavery and for unions, said a powerful quote, "Power concedes nothing without demand. It never has, and it never will. The only ones who win if we are divided is the bosses. Let's show them that we are tired of the rich playing with our jobs and lives. We cannot control what we do not own. Workers over profit. Community and workers deserve clean air. Let's tax the rich and retool the city." Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Willis?
And I'm also calling up Mike Ewell. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Martin Willis, and I'm a union boilermaker from Newcastle, Delaware. I'd like to address my comments not only to the Refinery Advisory Group's business community present here today, but to anyone who testified at the August 27th Environmental and Academic meeting. At that meeting, I heard numerous proposals to turn the Philadelphia Refinery into a commercial solar farm, a biomass facility, a geothermal site, and a place to manufacture wind turbine components, which is all good an idea. And more than one person brought up the need that union men and women displaced from the closure of the Philadelphia Refinery could transition from their good-paying fossil fuel jobs to sustainable renewable energy jobs, which is also fine. But what I didn't hear August 27 is simply this. I have a group of investors made up from doctors from Penn, members of Power, and the Clean Air Council, who with the private sector are willing to fund with their own money good sustainable jobs. This is the part that annoys me the most. People have so many ideas, but they're not willing to put their own skin in the game. The refinery, or what should become a refinery? The city of Philadelphia is not going to take the responsibility and liability associated with an industrial site such as this. But constantly I hear the city of Philadelphia should take over the site. Instead of let us, activists, scientists, pull our own money together and form a corporation with private sector investment to buy up any formal industrial site. PES is not the only site available in seeking bids for redevelopment. Here we have tonight the government regulators, the business community, and the union laborers. If you have an idea of what you'd like to see for the Philadelphia Refinery, here's your chance to put your idea to work. The future is now. The refinery, and most refineries, the medicine that you make comes from benzene. The cosmetics are part of the petrochemical process. Plastics are part of the petrochemical plastics. Synthetic rubber, cleaning products, and the asphalt all come from petrochemicals. Like I said before, we have the business community, we have unions. I'm a member of the building trades. I don't need retraining. I can build anything you want. The members here that worked in that refinery don't need to be transitioned to another job. We just need a job. The future is now. If you have an idea, present your idea. I'm sure the City Commerce, Chamber of Commerce will put your ideas to work. It's that easy and that simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ewell, and I'm also calling up Brent Gross.
Okay, hi, my name is Mike Ewell. I'm the founder and director of Energy Justice Network. We're a national organization based here in Philadelphia. I want to start with the fact that the American Lung Association gave Philadelphia an F grade for our air quality. The Asthma Analogy Foundation of America said that Philadelphia is the 4th worst asthma capital in the country. And among the 10 largest cities in the US, our cancer rate is the highest. We're number 1. Now, some people talked about how this refinery is the largest polluter in the city, or when it was operating, that's the case. Let me put some more numbers to that to show how much they're the largest. There are 84 industrial facilities that are tracked by the Department of Environmental Protection in terms of their air emissions in the city. In 2017, this refinery accounted for 64% of the total pounds of pollution from 84 facilities. That's just huge. That's not even close to average. That's just blows everything out of the water. It's 7 times more than the second largest polluter, which is a chemical plant up near my area of the city in Northeast, which gets their feedstock from this refinery. The cumene they make feeds that plant so they can make toxic ingredients like phenol for bisphenol A and nylon and other things that are feeding the plastics economy that's killing people. Now, this is the business meeting, so I came here to talk business. I saw a lot of numbers presented, $2.3 billion in economic impact. Now, if that was an objective analysis, how come I didn't see anything about the harms to the economy from the health impacts caused by this refinery? So let's put some numbers to that. I did some back of the envelope because I wasn't paid, I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars to come up with economic analyses, but some back of the envelope calculations based on other published research shows that just one pollutant that comes out of this refinery, I'm talking about the particulate matter, the fine stuff, the PM 2.5 as they call it, it's associated with premature death, heart disease, chronic bronchitis, and other respiratory distress. Just that one pollutant, the amount of pollution that they're kicking out of that refinery when they're operating, is enough to cause $1.5 billion in economic harm to the region. That's a big chunk of that 2.3, isn't it? That's just one pollutant. Philadelphia alone experiences asthma costs estimated at $1 billion per year just from asthma. Nitrogen oxides trigger asthma, and this is the #1 source of nitrogen oxide pollution in the city. Closing PES was the equivalent of taking 20% of the cars and trucks off the roads of Philadelphia in terms of the nitrogen oxide emissions that trigger asthma attacks. And they're not just high in those. I mean, someone said they're the majority, they're 50% or more. Let's put a few numbers on that. They're 87% of the benzene from industry in the city, 85% of the mercury and cadmium, 77% of the arsenic, 70% of the chromium-6 that causes cancer, 65% of sulfur dioxides, 60% of the particulate matter, 55% of the nitrogen oxides. That's a lot. That's a big share. Just the 28 pounds of mercury they put into the air each year is enough, according to calculations by a famous study out of Minnesota about how much mercury it takes to poison a 20-acre lake to the point where you can't eat the fish. Well, that's enough mercury so that it will poison 12,700 20-acre lakes to the point where you can't eat the fish because of mercury. That's how much 28 pounds of mercury a year is. So I think the case is closed in terms of whether this is a good idea for Philadelphia. What I want to focus on as well is the idea of what the alternatives could look like. There's a company based here called SG Preston who's been talking about using some of this refinery site to make biofuels for jets. They have a 10-year contract with JetBlue and Airbus they're trying to fulfill, and they've been trying to build plants on various places in the country. They have succeeded building 0 so far. I talked to folks in Logansport, one of our member groups out there. We helped them stop a giant waste incinerator some years ago, and that's one of the places that SG Preston talks about they're trying to build something. Well, they actually failed to build anything out there, and they got a $550,000 forgivable loan from the city that they never bothered to pay back. And this is the company that we want to invite into Philadelphia and create jobs that are going to rely on biofuels that have been shown to have climate impacts and other environmental impacts comparable, and if not worse, than fossil fuels.
That's time.
Okay, I'll stop there then. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Groves? And I'm also going to be calling up Kendra Brooks. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Brent Gross. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Proud Pennsylvania. First of all, I just want to thank all of you who are serving on the committee for your time and your service. It's appreciated. So Proud Pennsylvania is a nonprofit organization that's really focused on local supply chain, self-reliance, sustainable economy issues. I'm also going to speak as a consultant on renewable energy and as an investor. So I don't plan to talk about worker training and support for former PES employees, since there's been a lot of discussion around that. I will only say that hopefully all the refinery workers will understand that they have more in common with members of the community surrounding the refinery and other Philly residents than they do with outside investors and PS. We need to work together to find a solution for ourselves and our children and for our and their future. I also won't be talking about climate science, since this is a business committee meeting, but it's worth underscoring that the science and the time frames that we have to act are no longer in question. A consensus of 97% of scientists agree we have until about 2030, and that's just over 10 years away, to make dramatic progress on reducing emissions, and until mid-century to get off fossil fuels altogether. I say these two things as lead into my short comments on business strategy, a very simple business strategy. So while there are infinite number of business investment models, one very basic way of dividing up strategies is opportunistic, which is short-term, versus sustainable, which is long-term. A simple question can reveal which of these two models are being employed by a potential business. Are you making the investment or business decision to earn a quick return and move on to another opportunity, or are you staking out a long-term position or interest? A simple example might be someone who decides to sell plywood and generators just before or after a major storm versus a person that decides to launch a neighborhood hardware store. The first one almost certainly will charge a steep premium for his or her goods, realize a nice profit while not necessarily building a customer base, and then move on to something else. The hardware store owner will likely spend a lot of time and money finding just the right location for his or her store, figuring out what prospective customers want to buy, and selling at a competitive price to keep loyal, steady customers. Without passing judgment on which is the better business model, let's think about the PES refinery. If you disagree with 97% of scientists and think the refinery has a long-term viable future, then that's a different discussion for a different time. But if you understand that there's only a small window of opportunity for refinery operation, and then the decisions we need to make become clearer. We need to think about 10 or 20 years from now. What will we want to have on this site? What do we want to hand over to our children as a place to work and around which people can live safe, healthy lives? Can workers at whatever exists on this site make a living wage and work in a safe environment? And finally, is it likely to get any easier to make a transition away from fossil fuels in future years? All Philadelphians, and especially our city leaders, should step up to assure that this potential liability becomes a Philadelphia asset, not a short-term score for a hedge fund or other outside investors. That means contributing our collective and substantial creative energy to figuring out the best sustainable use of this site and sharing in the financial obligation we have to support PES workers. Philadelphia has an opportunity to work together to be a leader in the transition away from fossil fuels while supporting workers that have powered our progress for decades. We can do this. We don't have any other choice. Thank you, and let's get to work.
Thank you. Kendra Brooks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kendra Brooks, and this is my first time at this meeting. And my first thing I want to think about is how many grandparents are in this room? And when I think about this conversation and the tension that it's causing between workers and families, what about my grandchildren's children? And what's the sustainability of whatever plan on this site for my grandchildren's children? Is it going to give them jobs and sustainable incomes for the next generation of my legacy? or is it going to be life-challenging health issues? And I'm saying from a family that grew up in an area with a plant and refinery and have generations of my family being victims of cancer. My concern is that we need to make sure that this conversation is being had on both sides. And I'm saying as a tree-hugging, union-loving activist. We need to make sure that we're having real conversation because jobs are important, but so is health. And if the people are being blocked out of these conversations, we're not going anywhere. Because in the long run, long-standing South Philadelphia residents, whether they have these jobs, union jobs, and long-standing South Philadelphia residents that are dying, are all one. And we need to come together as one to make sure that whatever happens here at this refinery, whatever happens here in Philadelphia, that is what's best for our grandchildren's children. And I think that's the real conversation we need to be having, and the union members need to be having that conversation with the community, because guess what keeps changing here? The corporation. People, they make wealth, get money off of our city, and they're gone. And we're still left to hold the bag. So I heard community members say they haven't had a seat at the table. Is that going to happen? I hear union members saying that, race relationships are being baited. We need to come together as one and, fight this issue as a common good. Long-term sustainability for all Philadelphian residents. And that's the thing that most concerns me. And that's what I want to make sure that we bring into this room. We have the money to invest in a real dialogue, not one side against the other, a real dialogue for the future of Philadelphia. And that's what makes the difference, and that's what's going to be most important to our grandchildren's children. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. We do have 3 additional speakers that signed up tonight, and if you can each keep your comments to 2 minutes, we will be able to still get out of here on time for the school staff. So I'm going to call up Maggie Gummier, Pasquale D'Ambrosio, and John Berger. Okay, do we have Maggie? All right. Do we have Pasquale?
Yeah, it's me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to put in a little more than 2 minutes. Sorry. I'd like to put in a little more than 2 minutes. I have a lot of info to cover. Maybe I can take her 2 minutes. Okay, first about traditional energy. There used to be coal when I was a kid. Now, there's no coal. But what happened to those people? They got retrained, they got jobs somewhere else. Now, there's also, I think that's the future of gas, because first of all, gas is dangerous. Small leaks are causing people to get sick. Small leaks cause house fires. Small leaks cause explosions. And where's gas come from today? Fracking. And fracking is very dangerous to the Earth's crust. And I think fracking should be stopped. Okay, what's going to replace gas? This is not a dream, this is reality. And these replacements are at the same cost level as gas operation. There's such thing as a fusitron. Fusitron runs on hydrogen. It does not have any hydrogen storage. It makes hydrogen, and as soon as it's made, it's burned. And that can be used for home heating. Laser can be used for home heating. They use lasers for cutting steel, and that could be a great replacement for gas. All right. As far as windmills are concerned, the vertical windmill, the horizontal windmills that you see down the shore and you see on television powering as alternate energy, they do require a large footprint because, first of all, they're dangerous. They explode, the wings fly off, and it can hurt people. So you really, that part of that land right there is not really good for horizontal windmills, but they could use vertical windmills. Vertical windmills in a cage. In case the blades fly off, they'll be retained in a cage. They're much, much safer than horizontal windmills. I wanted to bring that to attention in case anybody does consider windmills. Vertical windmills are the way to go. Also, you do not want to use that part of land for new housing. There is such thing as overcrowded. We have theaters. We have theater personnel limits in theaters. I think we should have housing limits in acreage in our cities. What I'd really like to see is that turned into a very green space. If the government maintains it or acquires it, I would like to see it turned into a very green, a lot of trees and a lot of grass. We can use that in our area. If the government does not, if it becomes private enterprise, hopefully the new owners would consider more trees and more grass.
That's time.
Okay, that's.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Berger?
Okay.
My name is John Bergen. I'm a member of Earthquaker Action Team. I also have bad handwriting. That's not your fault. And I'm a pastor at Germantown Mennonite Church. As a pastor, I struggle with time limits when speaking, but I will do my best. I am a pastor at a church in Germantown, but I am here tonight because I have members of my faith community who live in West and Southwest Philadelphia. That means I have families and children in my church who are alive because of the workers who work at PES. It also means that occasionally I get text messages from parents saying, I've had to take my kid to the ER again because they couldn't breathe, or my kid can't come to that youth group event because they can't breathe, or they can't come because of their migraines. So when I looked at those numbers of the economic impact of this refinery, I wondered, like others have wondered here, about the costs that get left out, about the millions of dollars that are spent on ER visits and other visits. I wonder about the other pastors who serve congregations closer to the refinery and the amount of time they have to spend on funerals. Funeral costs help the economy, but not in a way that I would wish on anyone. And so while we're debating the business benefits of what could happen here, those who really truly profit from the death in Southwest Philadelphia, they're not in the room. We know that. Their lawyers are off somewhere else, putting money in other people's hands to determine the future of people on both sides of this room. That's the simple fact I have at the end of this hearing, that those who are profiting off of death are not here to be held accountable. But as a resident of Philadelphia, and I will keep this very short, I know that the people of Philadelphia do not rest when those who need to be held accountable are not being held accountable. And I'm not quite advocating that we march as a mob to the houses of the rich, to the owners of this refinery, and take their stuff. But I'm not advocating for that. So as this group of people up here debate and discuss what should be done, and as community members whose lives hang in the balance consider what should be done, I invite us to remember that the true profiteers of this situation are not here, and they need to be held accountable. The future of Southwest Philly, of our whole region, lies in the balance. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Brian Abernathy to close us out.
All right, I'm happy to allow him to speak, but the level was pretty low. All you had to do was sign up. I just want to make that note. Come on up. Yep, you have 2 minutes.
No, I'll keep it to 30 seconds, I promise. So my name is Joel Thomas. I'm a professor on renewable energy project development and finance at the University of North Carolina, Keenan-Flagler. My day job is here in Philadelphia for Community Energy Solar. You may be familiar with the Adams Solar Project, a 70-megawatt solar project that's we're in discussions to sell the power from that to the city of Philadelphia. Solar is one potential use for this site. I actually don't think that it's the best use for the entire site, but I do think it could be considered to power whatever manufacturing is on site. The most compelling idea that I've heard today is the wind turbine manufacturing facility. And when you hear a solar guy say that wind farm is the better idea, hopefully that carries some weight in terms of objectivity. And I mean that. In my class that I teach, for the last 8 years, we've had one slide on offshore wind, and it says it's not there yet. For this year, that is changing for the first time. We're expanding on that. So the economics are there. We have not seen offshore wind to date, but now it's happening. And what I've seen time and time again with energy economics in the electric sector is that once something is in the money, you see a lot of it. So I hope that that is taken into account. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Can you make sure, sir, can you make sure you leave your name so we just have the record? All right. Thank you, sir. I want to thank everybody again for coming out tonight. I do appreciate everybody's voice as we tackle these issues. We are inviting everyone back for September 25th at 5:30 here. Again, that'll be an open house style. And we will be taking everybody's recommendations going forward and trying to gather those into a working document that we will certainly be sharing and asking for feedback on as well. So thank you again for this process. I know it has not been perfect, but we have really tried to make an effort to hear various people's voice. So thank you and have a good night.